Good morning and welcome back to the second day of the Global Progressive Forum here in the European Parliament in Brussels. My name is Kelly Agathos. I'm your host for the next couple of days. Yesterday we had our opening and we had a lot of interesting panels, starting with a conversation between Josep Borrell, Madeleine Albright, and with a message from Michelle Bachelet on global change and the importance of multilateralism. We then went on to talk about a fair post-COVID world as the pandemic exposed many inequalities, and we don't want them to be exacerbated even more. In the afternoon, there was also a panel on sustainable growth, and we finished with a discussion between youth around Europe and former Prime Minister of Italy, Enrico Letta, on the future of democracy. Today we have another exciting day ahead, full of interesting panels such as access to resources. In the world where 70% of the population does not have equal access to resources we may consider normal. We will then have a very relevant and timely conversation on migration with Commissioner Ylva Johansson, but also refugee advocates and refugees themselves, followed by a panel on digitalization and democracy and another session on the future of democracy. But first, we will open today, as every day, with the news of the day, for which I am joined by two members of European Parliament. Here with me today, we have Juan Fernando López Aguilar, who is Spanish and the chair of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. We will also be joined by Birgit Sippel from Germany. She's currently finishing some negotiations, but I'm sure she will be with us very soon. So Juan Fernando, welcome. We will start with you.
My pleasure, Kali, to talk to you and reach out to the viewers of this Global Progressive Forum.
Tell us a little bit about your work as chair of the LIBE committee, as it's known here in the House, because it's a very important committee dealing with many of the issues, actually, that the Global Progressive Forum will also be dealing with throughout the next few sessions.
It is actually my honor to chair this Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. For one thing, it is the most relevant committee when it comes to lawmaking. And you know, this European Parliament has grown to be a lawmaking body. And it's about time that people get to know about it. It's not only the only democratically elected institution in the European architecture, this European Parliament. It's also the only supranational parliament across the world. But most important, is the only democratically elected lawmaking body at a superstate, supranational level. We do make laws here, and of course, this is the most relevant profile of the committee I chair, because we deal with the fundamental rights, and the European Charter of Fundamental Rights entered into force along with the Lisbon Treaty, and is effective at the same validity as the treaties, and it's binding for the member states, and it protects not only the European citizens, but every human being on which European law could be implemented or applied. And then it also makes laws on the migration and asylum policy and lawmaking. We do make laws on the Schengen system, which means visa code, Schengen borders code. We do make laws on criminal matters. We are criminal lawmakers on procedural guarantees.
You cover everything.
Yeah, we cover a whole range of action, which is an incredibly busy order of the day, the one we keep unfolding, and it's not only time-consuming and energy-consuming, it's also fascinating, believe me.
And speaking of busy, your colleague Birgit, who is actually the coordinator for the Socialists and Democrats in the same committee, Justice and Home Affairs and Civil Liberties, has just joined us. Welcome, Birgit.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. You just came out of a negotiation. What was it on?
Yeah, it was a so-called political trialogue, meaning that both legislators, the Council, meaning the Member States, and the Parliament are trying to find a common position on a proposed legislation. And today we were talking about the very relevant e-privacy regulation, meaning protecting confidentiality of all our communications. And we made some first progress, but the most important elements are still in front of us.
Okay, so there's a road ahead, but you're on a good path.
I hope so.
It's very relevant because, as we were telling viewers earlier, one of the panels today will be on digitalization and democracy, which I know is very important to progressive leaders and thinkers involved in this forum, but also probably watching us virtually. So if you want to tune in to that later, you can find our program on globalprogressiveforum.org. So great. Now that we've introduced you to our audience, why don't we start with the news of the day? I believe you both have a few news items with you that you'd like to discuss. We'll start with you, Juan Fernando. What is the first item of news today that you'd like to share?
Well, actually, not exactly news. Regrettably so, I keep fighting what I have called so many times a negative approach towards migration and asylum, because it's the result of a predominant, I would say, conservative, leaning to reactionary outlook to the mandate that has been set forth in the European law, the Treaty of Lisbon to begin with, to come up with a common European asylum system that is led by the principles of binding solidarity and shared responsibility. And as a consequence, we are still missing legal pathways and safe pathways which would help to save lives.
Especially
there are
now.
so many which are exposing themselves to the risk of losing their lives in the attempt of setting foot ashore the European coasts, particularly in the southern member states, those who have external borders towards the Mediterranean, or as is the case of Spain, not only to the Mediterranean, but also to the Canary Islands. I'm a Canarian myself. I'm a Canarian-born MEP.
And they also try to come via the Canary Islands.
Yep. The Canaries is having a real hard time. And you know what? The Canarian route to the European Union is the most perilous and the highest death toll. Just this year, we have had 20,000 irregular migrants coming with a very fragile wooden boat from the western coast of Africa. For some time, it has withered away from the headlines and from the TV news, maybe because of the volcano, which is even worse. But the point is that, believe me, people are still not only risking their lives, but losing their lives in the attempt, because out of those 20,000, we are counting 1,000 casualties, 1,000 people who tried to make it to the Canaries and didn't make it, died in the attempt. Most vulnerable persons, women, children, dying because they keep sailing adrift for days and days until they are rescued because of an airplane of the military patrolling the zone, or maybe some vessel which actually gets sight of them and sets the alarm so that they are rescued. But at times it happens that when the rescue comes, there are already 7 dead people in a boat out of 50, or in a boat out of 60. So this is a total catastrophe for the European, but it shows us a lot about the gap between the European promise and between the European rhetoric and between the European law and how it is implemented. The European promise and its delivery. The European law and how it is actually implemented by the member states, or denied by the member states all too often.
I understand.
And that is sad.
Very sad and very timely now, because of course we don't just have a route in the Mediterranean, we also have a new route via the Polish border. I'm wondering if, Birgit, you have something to add on this topic.
Now, to be honest, it really fits to what Juan just described, that there are no legal safe ways to Europe. That's why we have a lot of activists saving lives on the Mediterranean. And just today, to be honest, there will start a trial against activists whose only mistake was to rescue people on these rubber boats on the Mediterranean.
So this is your news item.
That's my news. The trial will start today against those people. The case started already in 2018. They were already brought to pre-trial prison. And now, with crazy allegations that are not making sense, they are faced with the danger to be brought into prison for up to 25 years, just because rescuing people, and this is a total damage and the failure of member states to act and then to criminalize people. That's unbelievable.
Where is this happening? Which country?
It's happening in Greece.
My country.
So we have problems in many, many countries, not only, as you just mentioned, at the Polish-Belarus border, which is a special situation, of course.
It's the newest, let's say, route. That is quite depressing, but it just goes to show that this is a subject that we cannot afford to lose sight on, and we will have a whole panel on migration later today. What is your second item of news, Juan Fernando?
Well, actually, she was referring about criminalization of activists and human rights organizations and NGOs. That is the case of Hungary.
Yes.
And you know what? The European Court of Justice has just stated that the legislation that was passed by the Hungarian parliament under the absolute majority of Viktor Orbán, hyper-conservative reactionary government, is against EU law, no surprise, because this so-called anti-Soros act is meant precisely to criminalize helping people, helping asylum seekers to get to know their rights, to be given access to legal aid, to interpretation in a language they can understand, to be informed about their rights to asylum, which are enshrined, by the way, in Article 18 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which I said does not protect only European citizens, but every human being on which EU law could be implemented. So we have a situation here. That is also a sad expression, but I would say that the reverse, or the B-side of this picture that I have just referred to, is that the European Court of Justice keeps behaving European, as this European Parliament is behaving European. At times the Council has forgotten to speak the European language, but at least there is a majority in this European Parliament which is still breathing European, and at least there is a jurisprudence of the European Court of Justice which is still breathing European.
So it's actually quite encouraging that this is being upheld. Birgit, what is your next item?
My next item, once again, to some extent, is linked to Poland, unfortunately, where we not only have another normal debate about rule of law, but Poland is denying the primacy of EU law and is undermining the independence of judiciary. So in these days, we just saw reports about a letter that all the most important political groups of this House signed, with the exception of ECR and ID, calling on Commission President von der Leyen to hold back the money from the recovery fund to Poland, because you can't rely on them, that they follow all the rules. You can't rely that there is independent judiciary to correct or control what is going on. And so that's very important, and it's an important step. And it's not only, as I said, a normal debate about rule of law and reactions to it, but denying the primacy of EU law, which goes directly into the fundament of our European Union. So that's a very special and dangerous situation.
It's not only dangerous, but it's also a bit existential, a bit like questioning
That's
the
true,
EU
because
as a whole.
if you don't accept the primacy of EU law, what everybody agreed upon when becoming a member of European Union, that's the end of European Union. And then everybody can do whatever they want, and you have no common line. And that's crazy also for Poland, because only all together with the 27 member states, we can play an important role in these global challenges in all the different political areas. So I'm afraid they do not really know what they are doing.
Well, let's hope that there is some effect to this letter. And thank you very much, Birgit, for this item. What is your third news item, Juan Fernando?
Well, actually, talking of Poland, which for good reason has become really kind of a nightmare for the concerns of those of us in the Libe Committee, which have special responsibilities on the rule of law framework, which also comprehends fundamental rights and democracy, the quality of democracy. You know what? The European idea of democracy was never confined to the rule by majority, to have a majority in parliament and then do what you like, because history has shown lessons which are there to stay for good. The point I'm making is that democracy is not ruling by majorities, respecting minorities, respecting political pluralism, respecting particularly those who oppose you, those who criticize you, those who are against you, who demonstrate against you, who freely express their opinions about you, going critic about you. That is the actual nature of European idea of democracy, and Poland has broken completely this paradigm. And we see as a token that there has been this judicial reform, this disciplinary chamber, which imposes sanctions on judges who dare to respect the primacy of EU law. And the European Court of Justice has stated twice that disciplinary chamber is against EU law and is to be dismantled. And they keep dragging their feet. And they keep trying to distract our attention and to play foolish games not to do what they should do. But finally, what is the outcome of it all? Exactly what Birgit described, that the Minister of Justice, who, by the way, is the Prosecutor General himself, the same person, the Prosecutor General. So he not only dominates hierarchically the prosecutors in Poland, but also points out who is to be responsible for a judicial file on jurisdictional matters, all at the same time, completely against the European idea of independence of judiciary. And not to abide by the rulings of the European Court of Justice, the Prosecutor General, Minister of Justice, asked the Constitutional Court, the puppet toy Constitutional Court of Poland, to say that primacy of the EU law is not applicable any longer in Poland. So Polish justices, Polish judges are not bound by the primacy of EU law no more. Well, that is the ultimate thing, that is the ultimate frontier. But again, the European Court of Justice has done its job, has imposed a fine of 1 million euros a day. Well, that is a situation we do not like. We would have never liked it to happen. But the point, again, is that at least EU law stands tall and finds its ways to somehow assert its validity and its primacy.
And let's hope it does. Birgit, finally, do you have any good news for us?
I do, but before mentioning it, I would like to underline once again that whenever we talk about Poland, we are talking about the government and the criticisms we have on the government.
Not about the people. It is about, because there are many people actually demonstrating. And in the last few years, we have seen that there have been not just for these, but for women's rights as well, for other laws, for the press that are coming out in droves and signaling their opposition to what is happening at the moment.
And I think it's very important that we underline that we are very happy to see this fights of citizens in Poland for democracy and thus also for European Union.
Yes.
So to talk about maybe a totally different point coming from Germany, I'm happy to see the news that the hopefully new coalition might be ready with their preparations by next week.
They said white smoke has come out.
Yeah. White smoke is there, and I think that's a very important development. We all were tired of having this kind of a big coalition in Germany, and of course there are many hopes, expectations, what could happen now with this new coalition, and it's even new for us in Germany to the extent that it's the first time that we build a national government with 3 parties. So, and they are all different, all have different ideas on how to prepare for the future with the socialists, the Greens, the liberals. But it's good that they are soon coming up with a solution so that we really can start with a new government. And hopefully this new government that we will have in that context for the very first time will have a positive influence on the progressive work within European Union on all the different files, including those we talked about today.
But yes, let's cross our fingers and let's watch that space very carefully. Speaking of hopes for the future, as you both know, the motto of the Global Progressive Forum is if we can dream it, we can do it, referring to the fact that many things that we couldn't imagine were possible 10, 20, 30 years, speaking about more gender equality, for example, less discrimination against minority, less poverty, the digital revolution. These are things that have changed lives for many people around the world and continue to change the way we live and we work. Sometimes in positive ways with climate change, sometimes in negative ways. But I would like to ask both of you, what is your progressive dream? What would you like to see become a reality in the next 10, 15 years? I'll start with you, Juan Fernando.
In my understanding, being a progressive is about change, a taste for change for the better, because it's easy, very easy, much too easy to change for the worse. Change for the better is heroic, and it takes a lot of effort and sacrifice. And being a socialist is about fighting injustices derived from inequalities. All of my lifetime, I have dreamt of a better world in which there is less inequality and less injustice from inequality, because that's the world I would like for my children. But for that to happen, we need a world that is left for our children.
So
and that makes it the #1 priority to make it possible to be in time to stop the climate catastrophe.
Oh, that's what you meant by left.
That is my dream. My first dream would be that we are still in time to stop the climate catastrophe. Because of course I am well aware, I have children. I'm thinking, will they ever get to see an elephant? Will they ever get to see a forest? Will they ever get to see what I have seen in my lifetime? Or will it disappear when they grow up? That is the first point. We gotta be in time to stop the climate catastrophe, no matter the sacrifices. And it's not being easy, because the transition is going to, of course, it's going to be costly.
Yes.
I only hope that it'll be a fair transition. That is the mantra, that is the obsession of the progressive family, of the social democratic and socialist family. If we want a fair world, more just, equal world, which fights all forms of inequalities and injustices, including gender or child poverty, we need a world left for our children.
Yes.
And that takes it #1 priority, to stop the climate catastrophe.
And this sustainable growth and the greener growth has to be fair and equitable for all as well. It cannot just be from certain countries making certain sacrifices and not others. Everyone has to pull their weight and do their fair share, of course.
That is the point, absolutely.
Thank you very much. That's a very good dream to aspire to for the next 10, 15 years. What about you, Birgit?
Juan already touched upon many questions that I can support, but I would like to raise a very concrete point. Unfortunately, today, too many people are faced again and again with crazy questions, with discrimination, segregation, even violence based on these questions. Where are you coming from? What are your beliefs? What is your sexual orientation?
Yes.
And then all the discriminations are taking place. So what I'm looking forward to and what I'm engaging for is to reach a society, a world where all these questions regarding your everyday life, your right to housing, to job, to be part of a society, are simply not playing a role. It doesn't matter. And I think we should not be interested, what religion are you, where are you coming from? The question is the person in front of you a person that you can like, you can work with? And human rights are human rights, and human dignity is there for everybody. So that's, I think, the very fundament of what we should look for. And then altogether, based on this, it's much easier, I think, to come to agreements with all the big challenges that Juan just mentioned.
Wonderful. Well, those are also great dreams to aspire to, and wonderful to have two members of the Libe committee here to tell us about these very topical and worthwhile issues in the context of the Global Progressive Forum. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. We will be back with the Silver Rose Award ceremony at 1:30 for Lifetime Achievement by Solidar. It will be with your colleague Udo Bullman, Francisca Sakilo, and Michael Leahy, who is the Secretary General of Solidar. See you later. Tune back into the Global Progressive Forum at 1:30, and you follow us with the hashtag GPF 2021. Thank you.